All right, Braves fans, we are back. I am George McNair, and this is State of the Braves. I'm going to jump right into it as we are going to go into how the Braves are doing, of course, as they're coming off of a 3-game sweep of the Milwaukee Brewers. But also we're going to talk a little bit more trade deadline stuff as we're only a day or two away. I'm coming to you mid-afternoon Sunday. So, of course, by the time this episode posts, there could be some news that I missed. But hopefully I'm covering most of what's going to happen. I mean, it would be actually kind of cool if I missed something, would love the Braves to be active, as much as active as they need to be, that is, on the trade market. Maybe pick up a pitcher or two. That would be, I think, of particular need. But anyways, I'm going to get into that later on in the episode. Right now, I want to dive a little bit into the Brewers series. I also, since I've been with you, the Braves played 2 in Boston. That was a really weird series, and unfortunately the Braves lost both of those games, a little 2-game sweep in Boston. It was odd on several levels. You know, you had days off before and after that series. 2-game series are also just kind of weird to begin with, and nothing seemed to go right in Boston for the Braves except for a very random triple play that they made. So that has not happened to the Braves. They have not made a triple play, I think, since 2004. So 19 years, a lot happens. A lot has happened in 19 years since the Braves made a triple play. So that was kind of cool to see. But other than that, there wasn't a lot of positives to take away from the Boston series. So I'm not going to get into that series too much. I do think in a lot of ways it was just a blip on the radar in terms of what the Braves are doing and how they're playing. I think this Milwaukee series, in a lot of ways, you start to see the Braves getting re-energized, back on track, especially offensively. They scored 29 runs in this 3-game series against the Brewers. The pitching staff is still showing itself to have some good moments and some bad moments, a lot of ups and downs from both the starting staff and the bullpen, as the Braves are still awaiting several guys to get back from injury. We are getting closer to both A.J. Minter and, of course, Max Fried coming back, and those two obviously are going to give a lot of boost to the pitching staff. But until then, you're seeing some guys in situations that I don't think are going to see in August, September, and certainly October. But yeah, the Braves pitching staff allows 18 runs in 3 games against the Brewers. The Brewers are a fairly weak offense. I would say at least an average to maybe slightly below average offense. So that's not great. But again, the positive side is the Braves score 29 runs in these 3 games, including 11 home runs. 11 home runs, Marcel Ozuna with 4 in this 3-game series, Matt Olson with 3, Austin Riley with 2 as he continues his scorching hot July. At least second half of July. Rosario with 1, and Ronald Acuna, who had not hit one in a little while, also hit 1 in the second game of this series. Game 1 was this 10-7 victory for the Braves. It was the debut of Yonny Chirinos. Yonny Chirinos was gotten from basically being DFA'd by the Tampa Bay Rays. He had, coming into this game, about a 4 ERA. It wasn't the best outing for him. He did show some flashes of good. He had a nice first inning, but he only gets through 3 2/3 innings, gives up 4 earned runs and 6 hits with 3 strikeouts. So a few good moments from him, but I do wonder, he's probably going to get at least one more start against the Angels in this upcoming series, but I do wonder if he doesn't show much else, if he might be going by the wayside before too long, especially once Max Fried gets back into the rotation. I don't know that Chirinos, there's much of a spot. Was he just, added to the roster to bridge the gap until Fried got back? I mean, it's just a couple starts, maybe, but we'll see. Game 2 in this series was an 11-5 win, a very nice outing from Bryce Elder, 7 innings pitched, 1 earned run. This was kind of the Elder we were seeing in April, May, and early June. So it was really good to see that from Elder. Really the best pitching of any Brave, I think, in this series. The Bullpen wasn't super sharp, but you also had pretty much the lower leverage guys coming in to this one. And then game 3 was an 8-6 victory in the finale of this series. Smith-Shawver was recalled for this game, which I'm going to get into here in a little bit. Kind of interesting. He was recalled at this point. He goes 5 innings, gives up 3 earned runs. He was a little erratic in this game, but there were some positives, of course. I think Smith-Shawver is giving you the best opportunity. I mean, he has the highest ceiling, right, of any of these pitchers just because of his stuff. And he showed it in this game, but he also gave up some home runs and was a little erratic with his control. But nonetheless, the Braves are able to get all 3 of these victories. And going into this series, I was a little nervous. I mean, the pitching matchups, I don't know, favored the Braves, and you could argue 2 of the 3 games, and yet they're able to come away with 3 wins. So I think it's very encouraging there. And, one thing that's encouraging, last episode, I just mentioned that I started to wonder with the trade deadline coming up if Anthopoulos might consider a left fielder. Rosario had been very quiet, and Marcel Ozuna had been very quiet. And so getting a left fielder with some thump at least started to make a little sense, especially if they slid all the way into the trade deadline struggling with the bat. But Ozuna just absolutely goes nuts in this series with 4 home runs. And Eddie Rosario is picking up a little bit. He's not as hot as Ozuna, but he's hitting .273 over his last 7 games. He did have 1 home run in this series, as I've already mentioned. And so it's good to see both of them picking up the pace a little bit. And what this, I think, means, I mean, I think it's kind of obvious. I very much doubt that an outfield addition is likely now. That, on top of that, I had mentioned Cody Bellinger maybe being the top outfield candidate for any big league club to go out and get that's in the thick of things. And the Cubs have gone on an absolute tear, winning 8 in a row. And they are in contention for the NL Central all of a sudden. So they pulled him off the market. They're not selling anybody. So that being said, I think the Braves offense and the position player, at least the starting guys, there's not going to be any changes for the Braves via trade there. Austin Riley also just absolutely continues his torrid 2-week stretch over his last 11 games, and this includes his this actually started in the Arizona series, right? So 11 games. Austin Riley is 17 for 44. That is good for a .386 average with 8 home runs and 19 RBIs. He's just absolutely clicked, and you might recall that it all started with him just basically forcing himself to relax, to not worry about all the little intricacies of his swing, and just let himself react to the ball a little bit more, and he is absolutely mashing the ball. He's not missing, and that you were seeing that a lot before. He was just missing pitches that he typically hammers, and he's not missing anything right now. I know a lot of people before this streak happened, they were calling for Austin Riley to be dropped in the order. They were, wondering. It had been quite a while since we had seen a hot streak from Riley, basically a calendar year. Last July is when he really caught fire, and there were some talks of MVP, candidacy for Austin Riley, and it had been a while since he had hit that hot stretch. And now he's hit another one. And, I looked at FanGraphs today. It's always interesting to see their projections for the end of the year. They're projecting him to go the rest of the way with a 128 WRC plus, which is very good, very, very high over league average, and finish with 36 home runs. And they were not including the home run he hit today. So I wonder if they would even project him a little more. But that's basically what he's done. Riley has been a mid to high 30s home run guy, and it looks like with this hot streak he's likely to hit that. And look, I mean, the really good thing that could happen is maybe he's able to continue this hot streak for a long period of time, and he's able to go even further than that. But it is great to see Riley continuing his hot streak right now. Matt Olson is also continuing to crush the baseball guys. midway through this season, you started to scratch your head. You're like, man, I don't know if the Braves got exactly who they thought they were getting with Matt Olson. He was hitting in the 220s. He was hitting home runs, but it wasn't much else. A lot of strikeouts. And then something's absolutely clicked for him as well. He now is with 2 home runs in today's game, including the game-winning home run in the bottom of the 8th. He is now second in the big leagues in home runs with 35, behind only Shohei Otani, who has 39. He's also second in Major League Baseball in slugging percentage. He's first in Major League Baseball in RBIs with 88, and he's fourth in OPS at 945. Otani's first in that category. Ronald Acuna is second, and Freddie Freeman is third, and then you have Matt Olson fourth. So Olson has just had an absolutely remarkable year, and especially, if you basically put that starting line right when he caught fire in the middle of the year, he's probably been the best hitter in baseball, at least in terms of power. So Matt Olson just doing some real work, and when you have Acuna, Riley, and Olson, who are all just on fire right now within the top 4, it is a murderer's row. And Albies isn't a slouch either. He's not quite as hot as these other 3 guys are, but he's doing some good things as well. I mentioned Ronald Acuna. He had a home run in this series. He also had several steals, including his 50th stolen base of the season. Acuna is now on pace for 78 stolen bases, which is on pace to break the Braves franchise record of 72 set by Otis Nixon. I think this was mentioned in today's broadcast. And Otis Nixon, for those of you who were fans in the early 90s, you might know that Otis Nixon didn't quite have the power of Ronald Acuna. I think he might have had 1 career home run. He was a pure speedster. And when Nixon got on base, you were betting that he was running, and he had blazing speed. But it's just a reminder of how special Ronald Acuna is to be on pace to break Nixon's record and maybe get to 40 home runs at the same time. Acuna is just a different animal, and it's been a pleasure to watch him run the bases this season. So I mentioned, guys, that Smith Shawver came up in this finale for the Braves. He doesn't get the win because the Braves fell behind briefly in this game, but he does go 5 innings and 3 earned runs. I've already mentioned he was a little erratic with his control. He was also kind of erratic with his velocity. He got up to 98, 99 miles an hour on a couple fastballs, but then he also started to sit more like 93, 94. Got a little better command when he was sitting there. But that being said, it wasn't a terrible start, and compared to some starts we've gotten from Chirinos and from Soroka lately and some of these other guys, it was better, right? It was better. And so I do think that he is probably the best option as a back of the rotation guy. So I very much wonder if he will stay in the rotation long term, or if this was just another spot start and he's going to be sent back down. I really hope he stays in the rotation. With him and then Fried getting back in just a matter of days, I think that will happen. It really starts to, you can really start to see the Braves rotation rounding back into form. I think the only thing the Braves are looking for with Fried, since he threw just a couple of days ago, is how is he feeling, after that last start. They pushed him to, I think, 79 pitches, which is the most he's thrown since he got shut down earlier in the year. So as long as he can come back here sometime soon, I think the Braves rotation is very good. The Braves going out and getting a starter, could it happen on the trade market here in the next day or two? Yeah, it could. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about the trade market. I do have some league news to start with, not necessarily Braves news, though, it's always a little bit related to the Braves in some ways. The first big news of the week is that Shohei Otani does not appear to be going anywhere. He is off the market as the Angels went out and acquired Lucas Giolito and another reliever from the White Sox to bolster their pitching staff. So obviously with that, I just had a really hard time believing the Angels were going to offload Otani. Anyways, if they traded him, they were basically guaranteeing themselves that they would not be able to sign him back. And I think their hope and prayer is that he stays with the Angels. So he stays, and it's cool for Braves fans because the Angels are coming to town next. I already mentioned to you guys that I'm going to two of those games. I'm going to the second and third game of that series. He is not pitching in Atlanta, but we will get to see him hit a few times. Hopefully, we won't see him be too successful, and we'll see the Braves get the win. But it's still pretty interesting to see Otani in Atlanta. He came for a brief visit last year as well. But yeah, he is not going anywhere. The other bit of news around the league is Max Scherzer has been dealt to the Rangers as the Mets are beginning to sell as well. And of course, the Mets with the largest payroll in Major League history, this appears to be kind of the nail in the coffin of their failure this season. And Scherzer to the Rangers certainly signals a big part of them waving the white flag. Could miracles happen and then they still make a run? I suppose so, but man, I don't know if I would be betting on that by any means. So, as a Braves fan, we're never feeling too bad for the Mets and their struggles. They certainly hit a lot of difficulties this season, and Scherzer had to approve this trade. He also had to accept. He had to take on his contract extension, which is $43 million. Don't feel bad for him for having to do that, but that's what the Rangers required to make this trade. So Scherzer will be with the Rangers not only this year but next. The Mets will pick up $35 million remaining on Scherzer's. I think it's $58 million still remaining total between this year and next. So pretty remarkable as the Mets just take a gut punch and deal Scherzer. One kind of weird little interesting tidbit of this trade is Ronald Acuna's little brother gets sent to the Mets. So he now has to play in the Mets organization. Feel bad for him. It's also would be weird if he makes the big leagues and they play against each other. But that did happen. One of the teams I've really been interested in following with the trade deadline is the St. Louis Cardinals. They are obviously in sell mode, and they had several players that I kind of liked, and I had mentioned in my previous episodes on the trade deadline. A couple of those players are going elsewhere. Just today, Jordan Montgomery got traded to the Rangers. So here you have the Rangers adding 2 starting pitchers at the trade deadline. That's hard to do. And Jordan Hicks got sent to the Blue Jays. Hicks is the hard-throwing relief pitcher for the Cardinals. So both of them going elsewhere, not to the Braves. So the Braves will have to look in other places for some additions. All right, so that's a few of the bigger moves that have been made thus far. I already mentioned Giolito to the Angels as well. So let's talk about the Braves. I still think relief pitcher is the primary spot that the Braves are going to look to add. I would be kind of surprised if there's not at least one solid addition made by Anthopoulos here at the deadline. The Braves don't have a ton of needs, like I already mentioned, with Ozuna and Rosario hitting well right now. I don't think they're going to really look at much offense other than maybe a backup infielder. I'll talk about that in a second. But in terms of their needs, I do think reliever is kind of the one obvious space that they could fill here. So what the Braves do at the trade deadline is probably going to tell us a lot about how serious their current reliever injuries are. So remember that Dylan Lee, Jesse Chavez, and Nick Anderson are all kind of on long-term injury list stints. And, there's some rumor that Dylan Lee and Jesse Chavez are closer to coming back. Nick Anderson is iffy for the season. But I think if Dylan Lee and Jesse Chavez, if the Braves feel really good about the fact that they'll be back soon, maybe they don't make a move or they make one kind of lower level move just to add another depth piece or maybe middle of the bullpen kind of guy. If they're iffier on those guys returning, that's when I think the Braves are going to go a little heavier and get a bigger arm for the bullpen. So, yeah, if they get one depth arm, I think Anthopoulos probably feels good about the guys who are, coming back soon. And if he doesn't feel confident, then maybe you get a high leverage arm. There aren't a ton of guys out there, but there certainly are always some pretty solid bullpen arms available. Probably guys that aren't even on our radar. There's just so many that could be out there. It's hard to cover bullpen availability. But I have mentioned a couple guys in the past, and then I have one other name that's been popping up lately that I'll tell you guys. The first guy is Scott Barlow. I mentioned him several times from the Royals. He has been an incredibly effective back-end closer reliever for the Royals for several years. The interesting thing with Barlow is he's actually struggled a good bit this year and specifically in July. So the Royals, it will be interesting to see if they do trade him because they would certainly be selling low on him. Would the Braves be believing that this July is just, kind of random or a bump in the road and he can bounce back if you get him? So I don't know if they'd be interested in him right now or not. The second guy is a guy I have not mentioned to you guys yet, and that's Paul Sewald. He is with the Mariners. This guy has had a pretty interesting career. He debuted kind of late, around 28 years old with the Mets. He's been with the Mariners the last couple years and has really turned himself into a very, very good relief pitcher. Last 3 years, he's been close to elite. This year, he has a 2.93 ERA in 43 innings. 33 years old, so this is not a young guy, but he's been very good, and I think the Mariners are they're on the edge of contention, but I think they're closer to selling. Probably not selling a lot, but one or two relief pitchers, that sort of thing. I think I could see that happening. So Sewald might be a guy to keep your eyes out for. And the third guy I will mention again is Josh Hader. I think a lot of you guys would be wanting me to talk about Hader and his availability. I do think the Padres are unlikely to sell. They are still 5.5 games back of the wild card, which is obviously not insurmountable. They have an incredibly talented roster, and they've played pretty well over their last 10 games. I also think it's highly unlikely they're going to sell most of their big names. I mention Hader, though, because I do think he's the most likely guy for them to sell if they were to sell anybody. A closer is a little less impactful. He would be a pure rental piece. So if the Padres don't feel like he's going to re-sign, and maybe they lose their last 2 games here leading into the trade deadline, maybe they go ahead and sell him. I do like Josh Hader. I think obviously he would be an incredibly valuable addition to the Braves if they were able to get him. I'm not holding my breath on it, but who knows? Crazier things have happened. Obviously, if you'd told people that, you've had some pretty remarkable trades at the deadline over the last several years, like Soto to the Padres and other things. So this wouldn't even touch that realm of surprise. So it's worth mentioning, and us Braves fans can hope that maybe something like that would happen. As far as the Braves going out and getting a starter, I've basically already hinted at this, but I think it all comes down to how good the Braves feel about Max Fried and his status. Even though he's not back yet, the timing of that is not great. They haven't been able to see him on the mound at the big league level. But if they feel good about his status and he's going to be able to get back into form as October approaches, then I don't think the Braves feel like there's any need for another starter. Obviously, starters are a little more expensive on the open market. You've had a few starters already go in Giolito and Montgomery, so you have fewer to choose from, even if the Braves were interested. Maybe they go out and get a really low-end depth guy just in case, but in terms of an impact starter for the Braves, I doubt it. Could be shocked, but I think as long as they feel good about Fried, they're probably good at this starter position. All right, the final need that I've mentioned to you guys in the past, backup infielder. I would like to see the Braves make a move here. I think they could get a better option than Charlie Culberson. I love Charlie Culberson personally, but if Riley or Arcia or whoever in the infield were to go down for any extended period of time, I don't think you would want to lean on Culberson for those, for 2 weeks or more, however long it would be. So there aren't a ton of guys out there that are, that really stand out to you, but, Heimer Candelario for the Nationals is out there. He's really more of like a third base, first base guy, so he doesn't cover the shortstop position if you would need that. Paul DeYoung with the Cardinals, I think I mentioned him in one of my last episodes. He can play a pretty solid shortstop. So he's a name that he has power. He's not going to hit ever for a high average. He's probably going to strike out a lot, but he'd give you decent defense and some power potential. So he might be a guy that would be actually relatively cheap that I think they could go out and get if they wanted to. All right, guys. So, yeah, anyways, the trade deadline coming up fast and furious. We'll see if the Braves are active. I'm just very curious. It wouldn't surprise me to see the Braves do next to nothing, but I really think they will go out and at least get one arm. All right, next up, the Angels are coming to town. Like I mentioned, Shohei Otani is visiting. I would have loved to have seen Mike Trout in Atlanta as well, but he is injured, unfortunately. I will be at Game 2 and Game 3, so I'm going to have a lot of fun going back down to Atlanta with my wife and my parents, and we are going to obviously root hard for the Braves. Game 1 of this series, Morton is going against Canning. Canning is 6-4 with a 4.46 ERA. Morton has been a little hit and miss. His last outing in Boston was pretty sloppy. In fact, I think he described it as a sloppy start for him, just kind of not consistent in the zone. I feel like his curveball hasn't been quite as sharp his last couple outings, so hopefully he can get back on track there. Morton has been pretty darn good this season, but he always seems to be tight-roping out of danger, and I think that's one reason that some Braves fans out there are frustrated with him, but hopefully he can get back on track. Game 2 is Strider versus Sandoval. I'm really pumped that I'm going to be able to see Strider in person. Sandoval is 6-7 with a 4.13 ERA. He's pitched well against the Braves in the past. Not that the Braves have played the Angels a lot, but I do remember Sandoval having a really good game against them in the past. But the Braves have been hammering left-handers this season, so hopefully they can continue to do that against Sandoval. And then Game 3 is probably the worst pitching matchup for the Braves. Chirinos is making his second start versus Lucas Giolito, again, who has just been acquired by the Angels. He is 6-7 with a 3.85 ERA for the year. Giolito is not unhittable, but he has really good stuff, and when he's on, he can be unhittable. He's just a little inconsistent with that. So, all right, guys. Well, the Braves, again, turning things around, sweeping the Milwaukee Brewers, and inviting the Angels into town. Obviously, the Angels are fighting for a wild card spot, so be two potential playoff teams going against each other in this one, and it'll be fun to watch. All right, well, guys, I appreciate you listening or maybe watching on YouTube another episode of State of the Braves, and I will talk to you soon.